Hospital Porter's pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO Radio.
Well, Angela Power Disney is a lady I've not met. She lives in Ireland, but I have watched several of her videos. She's done several very interesting interviews, and I've watched the videos, and I found her story absolutely fascinating. And I've contacted her, and we've spoken. She has some very interesting She has some very interesting insights into what's really going on in the world in terms of psychology and mind control, and this is based on her own experiences as a child, and some very nasty experiences she went through as a child. And what she talks about is actually quite enlightening when it comes to analysing things that have happened to me in my life. So I found just talking to her very, very interesting indeed. So I'm sure you will as well. Here we go. It's Angela Power Disney. Well, ladies and gentlemen, listeners to the HPANWO show on HPANWO Radio, I'm joined this evening by a very interesting lady indeed, Angela Power Disney. Hey, Angela.
How are you doing, Ben?
All right, thanks. It's good to talk to you again. It's great to
you too, for sure.
We communicated a lot, and I think we have similar interests and maybe even some similar experiences. But so, and of course, we both have a very good mutual friend, Kathy Morgan, who has been on this show. So I wanted to get your take on a few issues that's connected to the various nasty things that are going on in the world.
Okay.
So tell us exactly what you do.
Well, I'm 60, so and I've been struggling with ill health since 2014. But I finished raising my 3 children. The youngest is 20. And once he did his equivalent of A-levels, I thought, right, I said, kids, mum's going back to work and it's going to be a rocky ride. So I went back to campaigning and activism and trying to piece together my own past, trying to take legal action on my own childhood, MKUltra and paedophilia and abuse and so on. I just went back to work full steam ahead since 2 years ago. So I work online. I'm a mum and a nana, and I have health issues, but I don't just work online. I actually go to court cases, I go to protests. I hope to go to the Ireland Awake conference in March in Waterford. I've flown over to England quite a few times in the last 2 years, 3 years. So that's it. That's me.
So you live in Ireland, and
I do.
That's there's a lot of stories coming out of Ireland about especially related to crimes against children, and we had Brian Clare on the programme a few weeks ago. He's a regular guest. You probably know about him. Yeah, he talks about his own experiences from the English side of things.
Yeah.
But I mean, I suppose people hear all the time about church schools, convents where the nuns have babies and things like that, and the children are abused. But I mean, is it deeper than that? Because this is all virtually mainstream now. The story about the nuns and the church schools and things like that.
Yeah, I think Ireland's the best kept secret. It's like when we pretended to be neutral, and yet planes were refueling in Shannon to go and do torture and conduct the Iraqi war and so on and so forth. I just think Irish. I've got a love-hate. I'm half Irish. I sound English. I know. I was raised in the military, and my parents didn't return to Ireland until 1981. And by then I was adult, so I didn't return full-time till 1996. But the Catholic clerical abuse thing has been pretty much exposed in Ireland. The Magdalene laundries, the mother and baby units, the 800 remains of 800 babies at Tuam, and so on and so forth. But what's under the radar in Ireland is Satanism and Freemasonry.
Right, and this is connected to, you mentioned MKUltra.
Yeah, the MKUltra that I suffered wasn't in Ireland, although I do believe my father's family were a targeted and labelled family from the get-go. I think My dad was one of 16 in Dungarvan in Waterford, and Power is a lost bloodline de Puer, who were actually Protestant landowners, and an ancestor was the architect of Salisbury Cathedral, and there was lords and sirs and what have you, but it was a lost bloodline that had, transmuted into Catholic, apparent insignificance. But I do believe my father's family was tagged and labelled for use from a very early stage. But my own experiences started, I can track it back with both my parents. I believe both were labelled for use in programmes, but I was born at a military base in Germany, R.A.F. Vegberg, as was one of my sisters, and I believe, my mum was well and truly embedded into programmes by them, which started, in utero.
This is now R.A.F. Vegberg. I remember you mentioned this in one of your videos, and you showed some pictures of the place, because the hospital. Yeah. So there's something significant about the hospital there. I think you wanted to show.
Yeah, and there's more stuff coming out. There's research that Quinn Michaels is doing with military bases in America, which is really connecting dots with like the military bases that my father was stationed on in the Air Force. So R.A.F. Vegberg was built in 111 days, and it's a catchment area that would house Army and Royal Air Force, and I believe American base, plus secular, and it also had a catchment of 3 countries. It was near Mönchengladbach, so it was quite close to Belgium. I think it was Belgium, France and Germany, so it was very well positioned. And then the architecture is something that Quinn Michaels is talking about in circles. First of all, it was suspicious that it was built in 111 days, very much Freemasonic architecture and geometry and so on. And then these sort of circular inner courtyards for maternity, and I'm not sure if there was psychiatry, but catering and so on and so forth. And it's closed now, but I joined a group because I know I have a lot of suspicions about both my sister and I from birth on, and even before that. And I joined a group online called I Was Born in R.A.F. Vegberg, and I connected with somebody else who had a story very similar to my sister's, which indicated some kind of a program going on where a military person, either blackmailed or bribed, would make his wife and another pregnant at the same time. They would both be in the catchment of the hospital for maternity, and the babies would be switched at birth. And it was part of an experiment, as I understand, to examine the mother-child bond, and was it nature or was it nurture, and so on and so forth. It was all part of this kind of crazy post-war Nazi research into, they had all sorts of crazy programs, including the twin programs that Kathy Morgan's expert on. But
yeah.
And then I also got other people there saying that there had been a very high infant mortality rate at the hospital. And then I started to get some really excellent intel, and then I got busted and thrown out the group.
oh dear. Well, it's obviously they didn't want you. You're the snake in the garden, obviously. But
you're snooping around and saying anything adverse about the Royal Air Force, because a lot of the people born there had gone on to join the military just as their parents had. It's kind of a generational thing, isn't it?
It can be, yeah. I mean, it's I showed the pictures you showed me. You showed everyone on your video. Look really, really strange, because I can see the strange architecture there, and that is a recurring feature.
And that's what I was going to say. Quinn Michaels has been doing some research on a military base in America. I think it's called Camp Blessing, and he was saying a military base is the perfect way to get an underground facility built or developed, because you know, it's a transitional community. You've got people coming for the maximum of 3-year postings, and so it's a constant moving. Nobody gets to see the whole big picture. And then he talked about, I really should refer that, but the thing he triggered for me was, it made me think about R.A.F. Holton, which was a Rothschild property, and you know, where the helicopter crash was recently. And originally, that Rothschild lent, I don't know, was it 1,000 acres to the Royal Air Force, and then decided he didn't want to live in the house, and then gave it permanently to the Royal Air Force, and then the main house is now a sort of a guest, you know, it's open to the public and stuff like that. But what Quinn Michaels was pointing out in Camp Blessing, seemed to be a similar story, but what he was pointing out was that it was a cover. Once the underground base was sufficiently in place, it didn't matter what you did with the surface, you know. It's a bit like the Rothschild recently offloading that huge hunting island. You know, if something's served its purpose, it can look good if they've offloaded it.
Yeah. The underground facility could still be there. It's just,
absolutely. It could still be there and totally accessible, hundreds of miles, as we know so many other, you know, like Rudloe Manor, Corsham, and
that's right, yeah.
Pease, you know, Pease, all of them, Peasedown.
Peasemore, yeah.
Well, yeah, you can drive basically for 60 miles, you know, in them, and so it's a whole other city. It's a whole other. So what's on top of it is no longer the main thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I recommend the studies by Richard Sauder and his work on the deep underground military bases. And they are, I mean, an overt military base is the best cover, along with airports as well. It's another favourite. You can build an airport and build a deep underground military base beneath it. That's another favourite, is the airport.
Yeah, same with Gibraltar. We had a 3-year posting in Gibraltar, and my kids have just bought a PlayStation game, and one of the games is set in the tunnels in Gibraltar, and it's very realistic, you know. And I was like freaking out, watching it, like, oh my god, that's Gibraltar, you know.
That's spooky, isn't it? I mean, there's a couple of computer games that have these strange things in. Like there's one called Half-Life, I know, where you go into deep under Area 51 or something. And
wow.
I played one actually. It was Flight Simulator. I don't know if that counts as a game, but there's one game where you actually, one of the programs where you actually fly into Area 51 and there's these weird aircraft. It's like, it's very odd. Very odd.
It's almost like Disclosure, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's the same as movies and stuff. And I heard somewhere that, like, this, just let your mind wander with this, right? You get these incredible gamers that become really proficient worldwide on video games. And someone said, what if they weaponize that? What if they go live? And these kids still think they're playing games, and they're like the most skilled, say, 20 gamers in the world, and they think they're playing a game, and they're actually, you know, it's gone live, and they actually are killing people.
Well, I mean, there's a film called War Games, I remember, which was, it's quite an old film now, but it was about that, and it was,
yeah.
If you ever saw that. Now, you mentioned your bloodline. You mentioned the power, the name Power, which is it's often associated with Ireland. I mean, Paddy Power, you know, things like that.
Yeah, and Miles talks about, is it Andrew Power that wrote a book?
Yes.
Yeah, what's that book called? I can't remember.
Ireland, Land of the Pharaohs.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, it's a common name.
It's a really interesting book, incidentally. It's because it traces a lot of the secret society network through from the Orange Order, from a very elite group of the Orange Order, and some of the secrets they have over the history of that amazing country. So you mentioned, like, is there? I mean, you mentioned there's a bloodline element to this. Certain people of certain families. Kathy talks about this as well.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned that there was military families where it was traditional for different generations to join the armed forces.
Yeah, it was not a predictable with my father. My mother was from a very military family. She's a Dupre, French Huguenot, and I think 3 of Uncle Fred, Uncle Vic, Yeah, three of her brothers were in the military. One in Canada in the Air Force. I don't know why he was in Canada, but Five Eyes cooperation, all that. One was killed in World War II. The other was Navy. Her father served in World War One, the whole 4 years on the front line because he was in communications, and he got privileges like uncensored mail home.
Oh.
So my mother's got this collection of letters from him, talking about the horrors of the front line, really, and forbidding any of his descendants to ever go to a requiem or celebrate war in any way. He used to very much say there is no glory in war.
Nice.
So that's that side of it. But my father, 19, and by then the powers, that branch of the powers, and most of them in Ireland, had transmuted into Catholics, and so he disgraced the family really by running away to Belfast from Waterford, from Dungarvan, and he joined the Air Force at 19. And he kept it secret. He never would go on parade. He never would like his photograph taken, and we never were allowed to mention on visits home to Ireland that Daddy was in the Air Force because it was the Brits. As far as we knew our family identity at that time, it was Irish Republican.
It's I'm trying to piece together some of my own history at the moment, my own family. I've got an uncle who's in the army. My dad's never been, but I myself was in the Royal Navy for a short time.
Okay.
But I'm just wondering about, because there's some connections in my family to Dutch aristocracy.
Okay.
And it's my grandfather was he came from a family of railwaymen, but he became very rich for some reason.
Okay.
In his youth. And some people said this is something to do with the occupation, because he was part of this group that supported the Nazi occupation. Which is because it wasn't just a case with the Nazis. It wasn't just a case of conquest. That some of the people in the Netherlands actually wanted it.
Okay.
But funny thing is, it's like he was someone I never got on with. He was like very, very. But my mother, you see, my mum and all my uncles and aunts on my mother's side are very, very traumatized people. Very strange.
Yeah.
Very strict. They're brought up very strict Limburger Catholics.
Okay. Yeah.
Church every weekend. Confession.
Yeah.
The whole lot. The whole works.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just got but my mum used to hang around some awfully strange people in her time. Weird people, who got involved in our family, and so I'm just asking you because this is connected to my life too, because I'm wondering about my background. It's very strange.
Yeah, I think Kathy Morgan is so painstaking in tracking her own family background and the strange people that seem to be hanging around the family and the children and so on and so forth. And I think that's a key to a lot of her work. But Power did the research, the genealogy, and actually won. She's in America, Frances Mary, and she won an academic award 2 years in a row for Genealogy Researcher of the Year, which was unheard of because she was not an academic. She was just trying to trace the powers, and she did superb work. She tracked it back. I've got 4 parts of it. It's in notes on my Facebook page, Angela Power Disney, and I think it's also on my website, angelascashes.org. But she did phenomenal work, but she got so lambasted by the academics and those that were jockeying for positioning in research that she just gave me the book to publish. She said, I don't want it. Do what you want with it. I'll give you full permission. If you want to go ahead and publish it, do it, And she tracked back connections to Princess Diana and Camilla Parker Bowles, which is strange, in the same bloodline, Madonna, Gwen Stefani, and so on. And that's not the point. That's not the point of it. It's just you have to look, that why... I only understood the bloodline fascination from watching my father and other people that were horse breeders or dog breeders at a very high level, like racehorses, thoroughbreds, you know, and so on and so forth. And they would spend hours upon hundreds of hours, you know, searching for a lost line in a certain, you know, so having become familiar with that, with horse breeding and dog breeding, and then it'd be like there'd be great excitement because a lost line would have been found in some remote part of so you bring it in and crossbreed it, and then it would correct, because you know with inbreeding you can suddenly start to get you know, disabilities and you know
yes, right, yeah, you get haemophilia and things.
So those types were always looking for a new line of the bloodline to introduce and breed with, you know, to keep it pure and keep it healthy.
I think that's what Princess Diana was, and I think that's what Kate Middleton and Meghan Markle are as well.
Yeah, broodmares, and you know, and all connected, the same as all the American presidents being connected. You know, it's a mad scientist kind of thing where they're like, oh, we found one, you know, and keep it secret from even. It's like the closest analogy I can find is my father was a horse whisperer. He's still alive, 92, but he's a horse whisperer and a dog whisperer, and he could spot a horse in a field. He just had an eye, and he could buy a horse in a field that looked like nothing, and it would turn out to be part of a lost line that was hugely valuable and, you know, hugely exciting in breeding circles. So that's where it made sense to me.
Definitely. Psychic abilities is another factor. And my mother was a devout Catholic. Well, she lapsed a bit, but she went back to it when she got older because she lost her mind a bit in the last few years. But unfortunately, but you know, she
and went back to Catholicism.
Yes, exactly. You have to, don't you, to go back?
Yes, sorry to laugh, yeah.
You know, but she was very liberal when she was young, I remember. But she used to have premonitions and things like that, and
the psychic ability is nurtured and developed on purpose.
She was very, very positive about her various premonitions, and she would say, there's going to be a plane crash, and it's going to be a plane with red livery, and it's going to explode in midair. And I thought, and then we find out that there was a big crash at Long Island with an American Airlines jet, and they said it crashed, but then later they said it did explode in midair because of like fuel vapor that gathered inside the fuselage and leaked. And I thought, blimey, you know, so my mum had this. She was very positive about these visions she had, very positive indeed. And she. What's funny about that, my mum was she was a cinema usherette originally, and then in her early 30s she decided to go to university and study, and she studied psychology, and she became a counsellor. She trained as a counsellor, and then she worked as a counsellor for the rest of her life after that, until she retired. But she had to retire early through ill health. Mm-hmm. But she had all kinds of strange illnesses, but she sort of brought home this old lady one day she'd met at university. She was this old Scottish lady called Isabel, very old Scottish lady, and I just knew her as Isabel, and she was extremely unpleasant to me. She was emotionally abusive to me. I was like 13 years old at the time.
Wow.
You know, and she was not only emotionally abusive to me, my mum seemed to be very much under her influence. And my mum would sort of like follow her lead. Do you know what I mean? And this is very
deja vu with this.
You see, you know what I'm saying. Kathy said the same thing because I brought this up to Kathy, and I mean she was very interested, and my mum, for a 13-year-old boy, you know, when your mum turns against you like that, it's a pretty heart-rending thing.
Romantic, yeah.
And it was only years later actually I found out exactly who this old lady was. Her full name is Isabel Menzies Lythe.
Okay.
And I told Kathy about this, and I said she was involved with the Tavistock Institute. Kathy went and looked it up, and she was as shocked as I was when she found out.
Wow.
But I just wonder, what the hell was this old lady? She's very prominent, one of the most prominent individuals in the history of psychological warfare. And for some reason, she'd latched onto my family. And she didn't do it to my brother. She just did it to me.
Yeah.
She was nice to my brother.
Yeah. They can target they could target. Now I believe.
Why me?
Yeah, well, you see, it was the same with Kathy Morgan being twin. She was targeted, and the other twin was. It was almost like a control experiment where the other twin was left to flourish, and Kathy was targeted, and then the two were compared.
Yeah.
And it's just if your mother, especially if your mother went back to academics and was studying psychology, and if there's a possibility there was some bloodline, stuff, then it's like, oh, could I meet your children, or tell me about your children, or I'd love to come over, and and then it's very nefarious. It's very subtle. But it's like, instead of these crazy scientists studying horse breeding or dog breeding, a lot because Pavlov was pulled over from anthropology to do MKUltra, they just transitioned from animals to humans without blinking. Yeah. So it's like, where before you'd be looking for, a new line to introduce into a certain, animal breeding program, all of a sudden it switched to humans. And it wasn't just about the breeding. It was like, if your mother was malleable, and if this woman had groomed her, well, then, of course, your mother would unwittingly feel flattered that this woman showed an interest and, possibly be influenced to actually be cruel to one of her children because this woman was leading the way on that. It's all experiments, but a lot of the time, your mother, the parents, can be duped.
Yeah. My mum, you see, my mother was very, very much in the pocket of this woman. I mean, she almost worshipped her. It was almost like my dad said, "Oh, it looks like Isabel has adopted my mum." It's almost like she became.
What she did was groom her, but it looked like taking her under her wing.
I mean, this is a long time ago. My mum died 12 years ago, but it's still, I still think about it, and it makes me shudder. Because I remember how it was really, really upsetting at the time. It was very extremely heart-rending at the time.
11 to 14 is a very, very vulnerable age for children. If you traumatise a child between 11 and 14, it's going to have a profound effect. Obviously, there's the Jesuit thing of, the first 3 years are ideal for trauma-based mind control, and then the Jesuits say, give me the child till they're 7 years old, I'll give you the man, and then there's almost the cut-off period if you're going to sodomise or traumatise sexually a child for the purpose of splitting them. Ideally you want to do that before 12, but you can traumatise and, sabotage bonds, family bonds, mother-son bond, whatever. You can do that. There's almost no cut-off period.
Yeah, it's just harrowing.
13 is a horrible time to have that done.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this is harrowing stuff for people who are new to this information. It's harrowing that these things are happening. But as I said to Brian, it's Brian Clare. It'd be worse if people weren't talking about it, because it's still happening whether you talk about it or not.
Yeah,
that's a fact.
Yeah.
Does this mean? I mean, could I have a twin out there somewhere I don't know about? Is that possible?
I don't know. I do know that I lost a twin, and my daughter lost a twin, and my cousin, my auntie Sylvia and Uncle Vic, they were twins, my mother's siblings, and then my cousin Janice, she went to have surgery at the age of she'd never been able to have children. And she went to have surgery, I think she was about 40, and they thought she had a tumour on her spine. And when they did the surgery, they found it was a mummified twin that was attached. So there's a lot of weird twin stuff. My 23-year-old was a twin. I lost his brother, and if I'd have believed the hospital, I would have lost him too. But I just kept saying the baby's alive, and they said no, you've definitely miscarried. And then I argued the toss, and so they did a scan, and of course they found a heartbeat. And the same happened with my daughter. She was told she'd miscarried and sent home, and then she was still pregnant 3 weeks later, and it was the same thing again of losing a twin. And again, with the animal things, it reminds me of my father talking, being a horse whisperer, talking about squeezing. It's a horrible practice they have. If a mare gets pregnant with twins, it's not predict. You can't guarantee that there's going to be a safe birth, and so they had this horrible habit of squeezing one of the embryos to save the good, to produce one good. It's a horrible thing, but to produce one, because they were valuable animals. So to produce one good animal, they would abort.
Oh dear.
One of twins on purpose, and I think there was a lot of Nazi scientists. I mean, Kathy's probably more, educated on this, but I think there's a lot of work went into this fascination of, if a woman's pregnant with twins, maybe we can get the best of both into one super baby.
That was Joseph Mengele and people like that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Because Mengele supposedly disappeared at the end of the war, but he wasn't. He was actually part of Operation Paperclip. But he worked in the United States under an assumed name.
Not just there. I know he was Dr. Green and so on. I believe he had free. I believe, and I can't prove this categorically. And when my case was investigated, Wiltshire Police reported the Royal Air Force for being uncooperative. They reported them to the Ombudsman. They wouldn't release any medical files for me, and they were very uncooperative. So I was told that Wiltshire Police couldn't get anywhere with them, and I'd have to go through a direct complaint through the MOD. But there was something I was going to say. I lost my chain of thought there.
All right. But I can add something to what you said before. Well, if you think about that, but. You mentioned about twins and losing twins, and how they tried to persuade you basically to have like a D&C dilation. And
I don't know if they were going for the D&C, but they said they certainly, I think, suggested to my sister, my daughter, or just sent her home and said, you've had a miscarriage. I don't know if they suggested a D&C. And then 2-3 weeks later, she was still pregnant. So I don't know what the agenda is there.
Because I had a narrow brush.
I was going to say to you, sorry, just to finish that chain of thought. I believe Mengele had free passage, not just in America. I believe he was setting up experiments and supervising them, including in R.A.F. Vegberg.
Right. Yeah,
and I believe the purpose that the military threw up this amazing Freemasonic, probably on ley lines hospital, with an amazing catchment area and close to the borders and so on and so forth, was for the very purpose of, it's a military base, and we can do experiments there, and we'll have a transient community, and Mengele can come and go and supervise and make sure everything's hunky-dory.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me, because once he had his assumed name, his assumed identity, he'd go wherever he wanted. He had no war crimes record.
No.
He had nothing, and apparently I hear he lived until the 1980s, actually.
And Max Spears used to say that he was still alive, that he had, that some of them, Max used to say he was in New York, and that that some of them were still alive using, all these crazy concoctions that would extend life. I was listening to something today about Dr. Feelgood in America, the one that used to give a cocktail to Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe and different people, Frank Sinatra and so on, and he was giving a cocktail of methamphetamine along with monkey gonads and
goodness grief,
and umbilical cord, all sorts. It's a bit like the spirit cooking that Marina Abramovich does, and they were high as kites and performing. They reckon it changed history. Kennedy won the debate against Nixon after having injections, but it was somebody else won. Just incredible performance drugs, and but they were horrendous. They were horrendous.
What's interesting about the elitists, they seem to be extraordinarily long-lived. I mean,
yes.
David Rockefeller officially died last year at 101. However, it's possible he's a lot older, because I mean, if he is a lot older, no one from his youth is going to be alive to remember him and say that guy's older than so he could get away with faking his age.
Definitely, this long life is something that they pursue.
How old's Kissinger now? 96, 97?
Yeah, and
George Soros is the same. Prince Philip is 97, I believe.
Yeah, my father's 92. Yeah, yeah, it is. It's definitely. Yeah, it is. You know, and they're getting more and more upfront about that. You know, blood transfusions, as they say. They don't openly talk about blood drinking, but they do talk about, you know, blood transfusions as part of the regime for the elixir of youth.
But I wanted to go back to what I was saying before.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
It's okay, that's okay. We got time to do everything.
Okay.
I mean, you mentioned your own experience of almost losing your son because the doctors were saying that you'd have a miscarriage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I had a very narrow escape myself
Okay.
in that situation. What happened was when my mum was pregnant with me, she had German measles. She caught rubella. This is in the days before they routinely vaccinated. But don't get me started on vaccination.
Yeah.
But yeah, she had rubella, and the doctors said that they tried to persuade her to have a termination. They said, you know, just terminate and start again. Like, oh my goodness me. Well, I couldn't answer back, could I?
Wow.
But my mum just said, no, I want to carry on. And they said, again, she had to push them to do like a scan, an ultrasound, which is much more primitive in those days than it is today. But they did eventually agree to do an ultrasound, and they found that I was alive.
Wow.
And so they said, oh, and they didn't apologise, just shrugged and said,
No.
okay.
They did the same with one of my sisters. They told my mother she had spina bifida, and she was born perfectly healthy.
I just wonder if I have got a twin, this might have been part of the process by which that twin was retrieved from my mother's womb. I don't know. I mean, funny, I saw someone. I mean, I put it down to a doppelganger experience, but I did see somebody who looked exactly like me once, and he walked past me in the street, and I put it down to a doppelganger experience. I'm a bit worried actually, because I thought like people like Shelley, Percy Shelley and Abraham Lincoln, they saw their doppelgangers and then they died a few hours later. So I was very careful crossing the road, you know. But,
oh my God! No, I'm not very familiar. I know somebody in America contacted me and was convinced that she was my doppelganger, and I'm not very educated on that whole phenomenon, so I don't know about that.
so doppelgangers,
You know that you could possibly die within hours of meeting your doppelganger.
Yeah, I mean the doppelganger. Anthony Peake has written about this. It's a supernatural being that it's a kind of angel of death type thing, but it looks exactly like you. But again, I mean it's possible. I mean, obviously, I could have an identical twin instead, and what I saw was a real person. But
do you know what make? Yeah, sorry, I didn't interrupt.
Sorry, I just wondered I've just thought that if I have if I'm involved in one of these experiments, which is, I mean, I'm not certain yet, but I mean there are the signs are there that this is possible. You know, I just wondered. Yeah,
you're just making me think that if it's true, as I believe it is, because my sister Fiona was born in R.A.F. Egberg. 3:30 in the morning on the 16th of July 1956, and then I came 11 months later, 3:30 in the morning, 16th of June 1957. Same hospital, same ward, same everything. And my mother's, they took the baby away, and then half an hour brought the baby back with Fiona to my mother, and my mother said, "That's not my baby." My mother clocked something straight away. She said, "You've brought me the wrong baby. That's not the baby I gave birth to." So she kind of, and so what makes me sad is Fiona's dead and I believe murdered, you know, because we were going to get DNA tests done and all the rest of it. But what makes me sad is that I could have a half sister somewhere out there that I've never met or known, because if they did swap the babies, you know, and you know the military wouldn't even release my medical records, let alone release anything that might lead to those kind of experiments going on. So it is a funny feeling to think there could be somebody out there, isn't it? It
is a really, really strange feeling, and it's an uncomfortable feeling. And
yeah, it is. It's like a complete.
Yeah, and I don't know how to ever prove this because I'm not certain. And my mum's been dead for 12 years. My dad's got his head in the clouds over this entire issue, and I can't even discuss this with him. It's hard. That
upsets me because both my parents were alive. My father's diagnosed with dementia, but I often think some dementia and Alzheimer's is because, now this is a bit controversial me saying this, but some diagnoses of dementia and Alzheimer's are actually, I think, an evasion of accountability, like, for instance, Greville Janner.
Yes, that's right, yeah. Very
So
convenient that was, wasn't it?
it's faked or not, I think if somebody cannot face up to something they've done, the easiest thing is just to let your mind wander, and that becomes a permanent state of being. Now, I'm not saying that's the case. You know, I'm sure GMO foods and chemtrails and all sorts of other fluoride and all sorts of other things have contributed towards Alzheimer's as a very real condition. But certainly with the likes of Greville Jenner and my father and others, I see it as more of a cop-out, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I do see what you mean. My dad is mentally normal. He's 72, but he's
Yeah, well, that's young. That's young. I'm 60. Gosh.
He's quite fit for his age. I mean, he goes to the gym and he jogs, and he's mentally normal. But it's not a physical problem with his brain. It's just got the kind of personality where he just goes into denial, and I just can't approach him.
I know, but that's the thing I was saying, is my mother's mind is still very sharp, although she suffers from dissociation too, and she was subjected to electroshock therapy, and she was told by the military psychiatrist that, we're going to memory wipe, we're going to identify trauma in your life, and then we're going to memory wipe it with this electroshock therapy. It's the latest thing. So she has suffered and been targeted. I would think she was evacuated from World War II at the age of 4 or 5 for 4 years. You know, I would think she was on a list somewhere from as early as that, if not earlier. But she has the capacity to join the dots for me. And she was at one point when Kathy Morgan stayed with me for 2 months when she was moving to Ireland, and my mother was starting to disclose and giving some phenomenal information, but the family shut her down, you know.
Oh dear, that's a shame.
And even she shut herself down. She just said, it's a very dark thing in my dark time in my past. I don't want to dwell on it. I don't want to think about that. But you could put my mother, myself, and 2 of my sisters, and we would all discuss the same incident, and you could see people blanking out and having memory gaps and freaking out that didn't happen. Yes, it did. You went to boarding school. No, I didn't. You know, craziness in terms of memory wiping and dissociation.
It is, and it's sad because very often it's not necessarily sinister. It's simply a survival mechanism. And in the case of my dad, he has no malicious intent. It's just these are things too painful for him to face.
But I feel frustrated with that. I feel like
I do too.
Yeah, the greatest gift a parent can give their children is the truth, like an absolute, you know, here's everything I know, good, bad, and ugly, of who you are, and especially if you're any kind of survivor, any kind of MKUltra subject, whether you knew or not, the greatest gift you can give that person is to say, here's the missing link you've been looking for. You know, I can tell you this, and, you know, this happened, and this person said so-and-so, and we agreed to that. And so, you know, the chances are we'll forgive them.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I have a very good relationship with my dad now. We get on very well. He's, like I said, he's very healthy. He's got a girlfriend and everything. You know, you wouldn't believe he was 72 actually. And I don't want any animosity, but I do feel there's unfinished business between us.
Yeah.
And it comes down to this, and I often wonder if there's things he's not telling me, or things that maybe he's blanked out himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can remember my father was dying in 1998, I think it was, 97, 98, in Cambridge in Addenbrooke's Hospital. And I hitchhiked there. I think my car broke down, and I just hitchhiked, and I got there. And I spent the weekend sleeping on the floor, or, you know, in the relatives' room or whatever, just praying all weekend for him. And then I felt like I'm going, you know, not everybody has... You know, I believe in God. I'm not religious. I've walked away from Catholicism, and I've walked away from organised religion, but I do believe, I do believe that we can hear from the Spirit and so on and so forth, and I do believe Jesus was the Son of God. But I felt like God said, I'm going to extend his life. And he gave me the scripture of Hezekiah, and I actually had a supernatural experience where the sun moved backwards, like shadows were unexplained. It's kind of complicated to explain. But the other thing I felt the Holy Spirit say to me was, your father will fully apologise to you on his deathbed. And at the time, I wasn't fully awake, so I didn't understand that. I thought, well, he has acknowledged the beatings, and he has acknowledged a few things, and like, I forgive him and I love him, and like, you know, what is there that he's supposed to repent for and fully confess on his deathbed? And of course, it's only since I really started coming awake and allowing myself to deal with all the childhood memories that I realised, oh my God, he's sitting on a shitload of secrets, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? That there's something else. There's something else I wanted to bring up with you, because it has to do with missing time and memory loss. Because
Okay.
my mum's been in psychiatric care, and she was actually inpatient. She was
Yeah.
actually sectioned for about a year when I was about 5 or 6 years old at the time.
Oh.
But I myself was under psychiatric care, like as an outpatient. But I have missing time. I have like several years actually. There's two periods of my life particularly that I can't remember. There's one when in my last couple of years at school when I was a teenager.
Okay.
But also a few years later after that, this is when I was in psychiatric care, and I was taking antidepressants. I was taking amitriptyline sulfate. And I literally, people would come up to me and say hello.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know who they were, and this is one guy I trained up. I'd worked for 2 weeks with him in the delivery suite at my hospital,
Right.
and I trained him up for the porter's job there, and this was like less than 2 years ago, and I couldn't remember him, and he remembered me.
Yeah.
And because I should have remembered him, because I remember people I'd met briefly long before then, you know. So I thought, and I asked him when was this, and he told me, and I thought, that's exactly the time period I can't remember,
Wow.
and that was scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I tell you what really catapulted me into doing the work that I'd been avoiding about the first 8 years of my life was when my children, particularly one of my 3 children, said they had huge memory gaps. And I thought, oh my God, this is generational. Do you know, that's when I thought, because I had resigned myself to never mind the first 8 years, can't make sense of any of it, so let's just leave that be. But then when I started seeing the same symptoms in my children of, you know, years of memory gaps and loss and dissociation and stuff, I thought, oh, I have to do this. I have to do the work, you know.
Do you think that's what led you into the work you're doing now, what you've dedicated yourself to?
Well, I was already, since about 2007 or 8, I already was working. Well, most of my life I've kind of worked to expose child abuse. I suppose I didn't properly disclose till in my 20s, university. I didn't really start to tell the truth to myself. But then I seem to be a magnet for wounded people. You know, I take youngsters in and help runaways or do prison visiting or, you know, naughty boys home. I just found myself always drawn to helping survivors or victims. And then I actively started doing something about that around 2008 because my niece took my brother-in-law to court for childhood abuse, and he got 6 years, but the family turned against my niece and myself and said, you know, that I'd made her do it and we were troublemakers, and you know, it was kind of like the shame of having exposed something, and that's when I felt suicidal. And how I first made a DVD was I didn't know who to talk to about it, and I just thought, if I don't start talking about the truth, I'm gonna just, you know, like self-combust or something like that. So I just set a camera up on a tripod and I just started talking, you know, and I made that's when I made my first DVD, Chasing Rainbows, you know. And from then I've just gone on a thing of, you know, the fear of being rejected by the family, the fear of being, you know, ostracized, the fear of getting in trouble. It was since about 2008 that I said, you know what, we're already the outcasts. It's just there's a veneer over it. And so I just started whistleblowing big time from about 2008. So I was already doing that before. It was only with the MKUltra that I decided to drill down on that when I saw that my children, at least one of my children was displaying dissociation, and there were other anomalies that were definitely demonstrating there was a generational thing going on.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a very, very sad situation when your brother-in-law was found. Obviously, there was due process. He was found guilty in a court of law. He was prosecuted. He was convicted.
Family blamed the victim. Yeah.
But the family blame you.
Yeah.
Even though it's not like you're accusing him of making false accusations.
Well, it was my niece's case against him. I was the only other person that had disclosed about abuse before that. Well, my mother had too, but definitely the modus operandi in my extended family is if somebody discloses, you ostracise them and you marginalise them and you avoid them.
Yeah, I mean it's really. It seems like this is also frightening when the family turn against you, which has happened to me.
Yeah.
And missing time. I mean, I don't know. Anything could have happened to me in these years. I've had these 2 periods of missing time in my life.
Isn't it? It's crazy.
And I don't know what it is. And my family, if they know, they won't talk about it. The only surviving member of my family. Well, I've got a brother.
That's what brings me back to this sort of righteous anger I have, that if somebody has information that helps piece together, your psyche and your soul, then why do they have the right to withhold information from you? It makes me cross.
I know, me too. Okay, so we're a bit pushed for time, but I would like to get you back on the show. I mean, I'd like to get you back on the show again. We can maybe do a part 2, because I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's we want to talk about. You mentioned Satanism at the beginning, and I've had Sandra Fecht and on the show. I've had Francis Toast. We had a round table, which is really, really good, and I recommend listeners check those out.
I will.
But one case that I want to talk about is the what's been called the Hampstead abuse case. Now, this is very, to say controversial is maybe an understatement.
Understatement of the century. Yeah.
You see, I got into this. I came into this late. I remember the videos of the children talking, and then I was so messed up with something else, though I didn't have time to sort of get into it, and then I went to some of the various Facebook groups, and it was and I had looked through some of the messages, and it was rather like walking into a barroom brawl and expecting to work out exactly how it started, because it was just all-out war.
It has been messy right from the get-go. It has been, and some people said it was a psyop and it was to distract from Shirley Oaks Children's Home Survivors Group, or, the inquiries that were going on. And I just, as a survivor myself, having listened to the children's testimony, even though I acknowledged there was a hell of a mess around the Hampstead case and some things that didn't add up with the adults around the case and so on and so forth, but as a survivor, I believed the children, and that was what had propelled me into, doing 3 years work really to try and get children safe and get the case properly investigated. It's ongoing, and in that 3 years, people have been imprisoned, they've been multiple arrested, they've been sectioned, they've been character assassinated, they've been gagged. It's if there was nothing in it, I don't believe the pushback would be as prolific as it is. The trolling, it's almost like a government level operation to keep the lid on it. So there are still people. It's like unfinished business. I do have days like today where I think, do you know what? It's 3 years. I've done everything I know to do. I've risked everything. I've suffered. If I was, thank God, I'm not like at the age where I'd be looking for a job or dating online or anything. Because if anybody looks up my name, it's a fucking nightmare. They've absolutely destroyed my name. But
they do this sort of thing, don't they? They reputation. They've done this to me. They got me kicked out of my job, and I've been like basically,
wow.
They will do that.
Yeah, discredit and destroy. It's a very real tactic. It's a very real counterintelligence tactic. So, So, I have days where I think I've given 3 years, I don't know what else to do. It looks like the cover-up's going to succeed. It is messy. It's not as straightforward as we would like it to be. But I still am praying and hoping that the children will be located and transparently safe, because the latest information I got was that the father had won full custody and has them in America.
Oh dear. I mean, this is so very distressing, because I was, when I saw the videos, I was pretty shocked about it, and then I went online, and Belinda McKenzie had done a video. She'd done like a vlogging video, and I just said, I put one little comment on. I said, "Hello, Belinda. Hope you're well," because I know Belinda. I mean, I got, like, the amount of abuse I got just from that comment was unbelievable.
Yeah,
I got called names. The amount of names I got called were incredible.
It's like an alligator. It's like negotiating an alligator pond to get to rescue the children. It's not faint-hearted. There are some breakthroughs. I have made contact with somebody that was consulted by Scotland Yard, but having, he agreed to me disclosing our conversation, and of course the trolls have identified who they think it was and targeted somebody and gone after them, and rocks outside the window and all sorts of like craziness. So it's a dangerous game. I just pray, I'm trying not to be naive about Donald Trump, but I just pray that draining the swamp will be a real thing and will include London, because London is in some call it the child sex trafficking capital of the world, so I haven't given up hope, but it's not an easy journey by any means at all.
Well, if he means what he says about draining the swamp, and he seems sincere, I just hope he doesn't get sucked down into the swamp himself. That's the problem. Yeah,
I do believe there's blackmail stuff out there on him, but I don't believe it's satanic ritual abuse or child baby raping, the kind of evil stuff that the Satanists do for power and attaching, demons and accessing fallen angel technology and secrets and fame and all the rest of it. There are those, and then there's just the simple blackmail thing. I do think there's dirt on Trump, but I don't think it's the Clinton level. I don't think it's the Marina Abramovich level. I don't think it's the, Alefantis and Podesta. They're in a league of their own. They really are.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned, going back to R.A.F. you mentioned that it was built possibly on a ley line.
Yeah.
Now,
and in a circular, these circles. I recommend people Quinn Michael's YouTube channel. His research. He's doing huge, fantastic research on circles with building and underground and
Quinn, yeah.
Quinn Michaels.
Quinn Michaels, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that ties up with the military and architecture and underground facilities and so on. Yeah. So, yeah.
So that's interesting. There's like the satanic element. Of course, we have this architecture. We have the ley line is always a part of this satanic ritual, which is why they do things in cathedrals.
Yeah.
They use cathedrals because cathedrals are built on ley lines.
Yeah.
Ancient monuments, of course, we know. Maria Wheatley's been on the show. She's talked about this. Of course, at R.A.F. they were doing non-consensual medical experiments on people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Tamsin McKenna Williams is good on ley lines as well. There's, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have got, it's energy harvesting, and it's a whole occult, esoteric, it's a whole other world.
Well, it pours. What it does is the suffering and the pain and the death. It pours a lot of negative energy into the earth itself.
Yeah,
that's its purpose. I think it's
it's
to poison the etheric body of the earth. I think
Yeah,
that's why they do it. And of course, children. I mean, this is why they're doing this to children. I mean, it's shocking information, but I think people need to know about it. It really is.
definitely. I think when you have people on like Brian Clare, and I've met quite a few of the children's home survivors, Mickey Summers, and many of them. Brenda McNamara. I've been to protests outside Parliament. Heard testimonies from so many children's home survivors, and worked with so many abuse survivors, whether MKUltra or whether different forms of sexual violence, and it's grueling, and you start to see a pattern, you start to see a strategy, you start to see that these people were planning on running the world,
Yeah.
So anyway, look, I know you've got another interview to do, so I'd love
we'll have to soon, yeah.
and we'll do a part 2 whenever
Definitely.
you.
Sure, I just want to bring up one more subject with you before we close,
Yeah.
because we've got I've still got a little bit of time. But
I need to give a shout out to 4 people actually as well. So go ahead.
definitely, we'll do that. Definitely, we'll get all your details. But electronics, psychotronics, implants. You're familiar with that?
Well, I am I run a group on Facebook, Mind Control, Social Engineering and Diabolical Experiments in the UK and the US. So I do have some people that are targeted that way. And I have wondered about implants. I sent you a photograph of pretty horrendous open surgery, catastrophic surgery I suffered in January 2014 at the Mater. And then a high-level survivor from America, I posted that awful photo, and she got in touch and said, oh my God, that's exactly what was done to me. And the excuse that I was given was that they were removing gunshot. She said they told me I'd been shot and they had to open me up to remove the gunshot, whatever. But I do believe, and then I've wondered about catastrophic dental treatment. I do wonder about implants. It's so easily done. And these days, they don't actually need to put an implant in you. They can do it with nanoparticles and like just spraying the atmosphere. CRISPR. There's so many ways that people can be wired up for 5G. But I've never personally suffered what I would call that electronic targeting. Thank God, because I totally believe like David Scherter and different people, even Nina Valentine when all her hair, was falling out, and Nina and I both share anomalies where we'll get swollen feet, and
she still gets that, yeah.
Yeah, and so do I, and we'd sort of exchange gruesome photographs and so on. It's I do believe it's a real thing, but thank God that I think I'm more overtly targeted. If I go anywhere near a bloody hospital or a dentist, I take my life in my hands, because
it does seem weird. It does seem weird because, I mean, you mentioned, we're talking off the air about the legal process you've been through to sort this out. But I mean, it's to me it looks like a pretty open and shut case. There's an incision which they said was a laparoscopy, which is where they just put in a keyhole.
And then went open, and then they reopened it with a scalpel on a dirty ward. Didn't even take me back to theatre, just reopened the wound on the ward without further anaesthetic. And then said, oh, now the wound's been opened twice, we can't stitch it. You'll have to go home with some vacuum thing that will eventually, over 6 weeks, close the wound. But it's horrible. It was butchery. It was. I actually believe they tried to kill me.
Well, I mean, I've seen this photograph. I mean, obviously, I'm a hospital porter. I'm pretty immune to this sort of thing. But it is. You've obviously got like an incision on your stomach, and it hasn't been sutured shut. I mean,
they never sutured it. They sutured it once. Then they said I had an infection, but
I'm surprised.
It wasn't that. They had missed out 6 doses of antibiotic. I was supposed to have post-surgical antibiotics, but because they were letting students insert the catheters in me, I had 8 catheter changes.
Oh my goodness.
And so each time there was a catheter change, it would take 4 or 5 hours to get a new one. So I'd miss my antibiotics. So in the end, they didn't need to reopen me at all. All they needed to have done was to give me my proper course of antibiotics. And the third doctor in the surgical team was saying that, no, it doesn't mean, she just needs to give her another day of antibiotics. And I think it's a teaching hospital, and I was like the cadaver, who wants to practice this, and who wants to practice that. Nightmare.
You must have some awful scarring down there.
I feel so brutal. I just feel it was targeted. That's the kind of targeting I suffer. And I just wanted to say there's a video online, I don't remember the exact title, but it's something to do with satanic symbolism in Irish hospitals.
Right, that sounds interesting.
Mind-blowing. And I've been to these hospitals like St James's and all the big hospitals in the cities. They've all got overtly satanic statues and satanic this and satanic that, and it's like, why should it be any surprise if people are having catastrophic surgeries and whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I can promise all listeners that, I mean, if there's anything going on at my hospital like that, I was never a part of it. I was a porter, but I mean, I was a porter, but I didn't ever pick up any rumours. I know there's some very, very strange and very, very sinister people at my hospital. I know that. There's some really...
Well, there's people at Stoke Mandeville that never... I mean, there were many people that did know what Jimmy Savile was doing, but there were some that didn't. They didn't have a clue.
Yeah. I mean, I just... To me, these people... I mean, it doesn't surprise me, the thing about Jimmy Savile and cut the cover up. The people at my hospital, there were some people I got the most horrible energy off. That's all I can say. I've got no proof they did anything wrong. I'm just saying that they're some of the most unpleasant and most repulsive people I've ever encountered.
Yeah, and you probably should trust that. Did you say to me the trolls cost you your job? Are you no longer working as a porter?
Oh, yeah, that's a very long story, but I was actually sat out through various processes which I've been into in previous shows. I was removed from my job, and in suspicious circumstances, I think.
Wow.
Maybe we can talk about that in part 2, because I'd love to have you back.
I'd love to hear about that.
But also, I mean, I recommend listeners look at the interview I did with Kieran Lee Perrin a couple of months ago, because we were talking about electronic implants. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of Kieran, Angela.
Yes, I have, yeah.
He's full of them.
Yeah, I believe it, and I've seen even Maria Kayali's MRIs.
Yeah, she has them.
Yeah, and I do suspect, I do too, but I just have never gone to that stage of being checked for them. It's kind of like a day-by-day thing. But I wanted to get just on the Hampstead thing.
Yeah.
So I've been doing some work on, child trafficking, the latest variety of it, which is, I think, operating through social services. It used to operate through the children's homes. I think prisons and then children's homes and military children, and now they've moved on to a blanket thing of social services. So Eugene Lukyanenko is he's either in prison hospital or he's back on the wing on full starvation. He's 68 days or something into a hunger strike, and over losing his son to social services. And then another guy, Archie San, did a hunger strike, and he's come off now, but he lasted about 60 days protesting parental alienation. And then Jake Clark was sectioned for campaigning for the Hampstead case and then complaining about the trolls causing him understandable anxiety.
Yeah.
And then Arthur Patel is currently sectioned. And now he has fessed up to having, I think he had a cocaine habit, I think it was, but that was not the issue. The reason he was sectioned was because he was trying to get a court case regarding satanic ritual abuse, including the Hampstead case. So just a shout out to, all, and there's more, there's multiple arrests. Sabine's still on bail and gagged, and, I've distanced myself from the Mackenzie Friends. You'll see that in my last update, but yeah. I don't wish on anybody to be maliciously sectioned, maliciously imprisoned, and maliciously removed from their job, character assassinated, hounded and trolled. I just think that's warfare. It's terrorism.
It is. It is an emotional terrorism. It's designed to silence people and to stop investigation. And it's very sad this happens. I mean, but do you have any website? I mean, you've got a YouTube channel.
I do. I've got a website, angelascaches.org. It was a play on the, Angela's Ashes.
Angela's Caches.
Yeah, and there's no apostrophe, and Caches is spelled Caches.
Oh, as in cash, as a storage cache, yeah.
Yeah, it's Angela's Secrets. angelascaches.org, and then I've got 2 YouTube channels, Angela Power Disney and Angie Power Disney, and I'm on Facebook most days, Angela Power Disney.
Right, and if listeners want to know more, go to the show notes. There'll be links to these websites, so you can check them out.
Yeah, and I did my original disclosure interviews with Miles Johnston, Basis 43.
That's right, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It depends on whether Miles has decided whether he wants them on his station or not.
Last time I checked, they're still up, but if not, they're on my website and they're on my YouTube channel.
Okay. If you find them on Miles' channel, download them, all right? Because next week they might be gone.
No, I definitely I've got them downloaded. They're on my channel as well.
Okay. Well, Angela, it's been great talking to you.
Yeah, you too, Ben.
And we'll have to get you back because I'm sure there's a lot more we can discuss on this issue.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
Thank you very much. Angela Power Disney, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Okay.
God bless.
God bless. My goodness, even listening back to that, I feel it's chilling. It really is chilling, because it'd be nice to think that the things that me and Angela were talking about actually were not real, and it was some kind of fantasy, or we'd made a mistake of some kind. But that's not true. They are real. What Angela talked about is only one of a very, very large subject I've discussed with other guests. Brian Clare, I mentioned, also Kathy Morgan, Neil Sanders, and Mark Devlin, and others, many, many others. It gets to the point where you can't even trust your own mind. The keep of the fortress in this war is our thoughts. As George Orwell quite rightly pointed out many, many years ago, the battlefield of the 21st century is the human mind. Psychological warfare is the absolute front line in what our enemies are doing to us. If we can keep our thoughts together and keep our mind together, they can't win. But if the walls of this keep fall, we're finished. And that is the stark truth of the nature of this war that we're fighting right now. Our enemy is ruthless, is extremely well funded and equipped, and, well, sometimes it seems to be gaining an enormous advantage against us. When I speak at Dreaming Sources, the conference I'm organising in Oxford, I'm going to be launching a brand new speech, one I've never done before. It's an exclusive, and it's going to be entitled "Is There Any Hope?" And that's a good question, because, well, maybe I'll be able to answer that more closer to the time. But we have a very, very steep hill to climb if we're going to ever free ourselves from this cesspit, and right now I'm distinctly feeling the gradient.